Kid of Arcadia, Chapter 9. Faced a train wreck. Mom was excited to see me all spiffed and smiling on the day they finally made their lives together official. She licked her palm, flattened the dry side of my unruly hair, and gave me a light smack on the cheek before ushering me out of the bathroom that morning as if doing the mother thing for the first time. For her, I imagined this new marriage on paper of theirs was long overdue, as if everything up to then was just some practice run and now we were set for the final go, like now would be for real. Maybe that was truer for me, though. My hair felt like a combed rug, and as far as I could tell, my tie was a pair of hands clasped around my neck. That get-up hugged me so tight there was nowhere for the heat to let out, but I bit my lip for her. "Get your brother together," she said. When I entered the bedroom, I found Eliot standing in a pile of clothes and trying to button his own dress shirt. "Need help?" I asked. He shrugged his shoulders, so I knelt down and buttoned up a few for him. Unable to knot the tie, I just slung it around his neck and got hit with the full lavender aroma of Mom's perfume spritz he'd received back there before me in the bathroom. He stared at the ceiling, shaking his head the whole time and clenching his fists. A half hour later, I found him in the backyard, skating around on the concrete with the skateboard. We were down on time, but now he was more disheveled there than he was crawling out of bed that morning. His face was crossed and scuffed and his hair was tossed. He'd thrown his shoes and belt on the grass and his shirt was crooked and loose. We're leaving, remember?" I said. He was trying to hurt himself enough to get out of going. His chin was bloodied like he'd fallen on the grit a few times. "I'm not going," he said. "Come on, I'm not enjoying it either, but it means a lot to them, so just deal with it for now, okay? It's going to be like an hour tops." I walked over and yanked his wrist. "I'm not going," he grunted, shoving me away. I tugged harder, but he didn't budge. "No, get off me," he said, ripping his hand back. "Well, you can't just stay here by I was cut off by a call from the front yard. "Yeah, he's back here. Sheesh." He slammed that board down on the concrete, stomped his foot, and crossed his arms to stake that square for himself. Now I'd have to stop being nice to get him to cross the crack. "Why do you have to be such a fucking freak all the time?" I asked in a lower tone, tugging on his arm. He shrugged. "What do you care?" "You already ruined everything once. Why do it again?" "I didn't do nothing." "You were born. That was enough," I blurted out. He kicked the dewy grass and pushed his hands in his pockets, and every tense muscle let out as he shrugged his way over to me. I felt a lump in my throat over it. Frustration had a way of taking over the reins at times, and now there wasn't enough time to talk him down, nor did I care to anymore. "Fine, stay here and cry like a little sissy crybaby girl for all I care, crybaby," I said, picking up his shoes. "I'm not crying," he grunted, glaring at me. After a quick stop in the kitchen for a rag to wipe his face and some harsh words from Dad, we were stuffed in the back seat of the hatchback and on our way to the reception. I held his hand the whole way through the house and out, and pet his shoulder when he nestled up against the back door window in the car, but he shrugged me off. He didn't say anything much the rest of the day. He'd been defeated. April 22nd, 1982. I was at school in the hallway, and I went in a door into the forest, and there was a grave there, with a bush and a tent and some stones. I rubbed the smooth ones on my eyes, and they cut me like glass, but the rough ones didn't, which was weird. The sun was in my eyes, and I tried to walk, but I tripped on a stick and landed on a sword. It almost stabbed me in the heart, but didn't. The day it all fell apart, I was called up to meet with the counselor after school, the same lady who was meeting with Dace almost every day, and I didn't even want to think about why. The woman closed the door, and the next thing I knew, I was all alone with my brother's caseworker and getting hit up with all these odd questions about my parents like she'd been waiting for me. The state was doing all kinds of things behind their backs, just another move in that old damn chess game of our welfare, and once again I was just a pawn in it all. "So did they leave you two alone a lot?" the caseworker asked, along with many other questions. She was really interested in why my parents weren't coming to pick me up and why I had to walk the long way I did every day. Through it all, I just sat gripping the little plastic chair against the wall, uncomfortable, really needing to take a leak and struggling to hold it in as the minutes wore on. I didn't expect the meeting to drag on as long as it did. Only in the afternoons and evenings when they're at work, and on the weekends. I watch Eliot good. I take him out to places and such, I said, squirming in the chair. So no one cooks? She asked. Yeah, we have dinner when they get home. Why? I'm only asking to get to know what your home life is like, Jared. That's why you're here. So when you are alone with Eliot, does he make you angry sometimes? She hunched over in her chair and scribbled down everything I said on a notepad. Sometimes. Nothing much. How angry? Have you ever hurt him? He can be annoying, but we get along. I mean, I never really hurt him. I shrugged my shoulders. Ah, so what do you do when he makes you angry? I just try to get him to cool it. Why? Does it matter? I leaned forward, my forehead starting to sweat. Jared, just so you know, along with your brother, I talked to a few of your friends about you. The school counselor here let me speak to a friend of yours. I asked if anyone knew you and your after-school activities because your brother told me something that concerned me. You're not in trouble, don't worry, but I just want to hear your side, she explained. She was latching on. Suddenly the whole situation came crashing into view. I instantly guessed Eliot had told her something that very day, and God knows what my friend had said. There were a number of friends I had, and it could have been any of them. My mouth ran dry. I was blown away that she'd already gone and talked to people behind my back before she'd even talked to me, and I lost all concentration. I had to get out of there. I didn't want to deal with this. Okay, I gulped. Like I said, you're not in trouble, but you'll need to be honest with me. Can you tell me what you do with him when you two are left alone? Can you tell me about the other day with the skateboard and what happened there? I gulped. He fell off. Who did you talk to? I can't say, but all I asked is what you do after school. Can I go, please? I really gotta go, I said. I fled the office with my heart pounding even before I took off running. There was no way she could prove anything yet, but I had to find out who she had talked to. This wasn't just some routine investigation crap. Someone out there had decided to throw this shadow over me, and though I couldn't be sure, I wouldn't be able to sleep until I was. I had a feeling she'd talked to Dace. That was my first guess. After a very needed stop at a urinal, I left school and hopped on the next bus downtown. I jogged a few side streets and followed the tracks to Dace's place, where I met him against the back of his backyard fence this time. He was throwing rocks at the tracks from where he perched beneath the boards. What's up with you? I asked, climbing the embankment. Waiting for Dad to leave so I can go in, he said. We sat there for a minute while I waited for him to make the first noise. The muscles in my face started twitching from squinting in the blinding afternoon sun. How's Kelly? He sneered. Fine, I said. I didn't want him bringing her up. His testiness almost made me forget why I'd gone there in the first place, and I knew I just had to be right out with it. He'd never tell me on his own. I gotta ask you something, man. Did some woman come asking about me today? Why? Do you want to hold that over me too? He asked. Just tell me, man. The social worker was getting on my case just now. She said she asked around about stuff. I didn't want to come off like I knew what it was. Yeah, she asked me what kind of guy you are, and I told her the truth. I said you're a queer, and I know because you didn't deny it. She asked if I knew what you do after school, and I said, oh, he beats up his kid brother. I thought whoever the fuck she was would love to hear that. I nearly jumped when he said it. You said that? What the hell, man? You want to get me in trouble? Hey, it's your parents they're after, right? Yeah, but They can't prove anything. What's it to you? They don't have to, I whispered. The sun tucked below the trees and rooftops on the other side of the gully where the tracks were, and their shadows now stretched so far they were creeping up to our feet. A car door on the hill slammed, so he forced himself to a stand. He stretched for a second, snorted, and hopped the fence, and I followed him, almost ready to drive him to the ground any second. My skin felt electric, my throat swelled. My cheeks warmed when we stepped inside and I saw no one was home. That was perfect because there'd be no witnesses. He threw himself on the couch and propped his feet on the battered coffee table packed with papers and bursting ashtrays. What's your fucking problem? You want to get me in trouble or something? I asked from the threshold. She hates me now, he grunted. And that's my fault? Yeah, dude, it's kind of your fault. He stared at me for a second with his dark brown eyes and then shriveled on the cushions, chuckling like it was one of his crude jokes. So you're serious? That social worker is after you now for something you did to your brother, and you're all flipping out. So you come all the way here to get on my ass about it so you can blame me or something? Is that it? I got you figured out, dude. Anyway, my dad's gonna be back soon. I gotta go upstairs. You were stupid to come all the way over here. Shit. Fucking damn it, you fucking asshole. No wonder she fucking hates you, I spat out, panicking. Yeah, I bet. She's telling you everything now, isn't she? Did that whore tell you how she fucking loved it? He smiled. Bullshit, I said, clenching a fist. That's when he stood and marched right over close to get up in my face, sticking his fingers out on every infraction. Hey, you steal my girl, you show up at my house whenever you feel like it and get in my business, you come in, just use all my shit like it's yours, you fuck yourself up and blame me for it. Seriously, fuck off, dude, I don't need you. Okay, you know what? You think I'm bad? You're too scared to even enter your own house when your loser dad is here. So don't start coming at me because that's fucking lame, asshole, I said, figuring that would set him off. But instead he just looked puzzled for a second and lowered his brows. Don't talk shit about my dad, he huffed. Why not? Don't you hate him? I asked. Don't talk shit about my dad, he shoved me. A car door shut outside. Time was closing in and I was starting to panic, ready to punch his lights out if he said anything else. There was no chance to offer any explanations and I didn't want to end it with him on that note. But the second I opened my mouth, his dad stepped in the front door. Something very dark came out of me at that moment. I was ready to kill him if I had to. Leave her alone, I growled through my teeth. You ever touch her again, I swear I'll show you what it's like. I couldn't believe I had said it, and Dace immediately backed off. But then his dad saw me. Who are you? The man asked. Startled, I bolted from the cramped room and through the kitchen, and flinging myself out the sliding glass door, ran the backyard in a second. I hopped the back fence and stumbled a short distance down the hill only to regain my step on the landing, and was only safe when I reached the other side of the tracks. It was over. That rapist and I were finished. And so life gave me things altogether more pressing that day than I ought to have been thinking about while lying in bed that night. As the hours counted down, all I could do was mill over the meeting with the caseworker and the afternoon fight with Dace long into the evening, as I waited for it all to blow over or hit us dead on like a storm from off the lake. Out the window I saw the streetlights glowing a few lanes over through the trees, and could hear the highway ambience blaring. Headlights blazed through now and then, each one making me think the state cruisers were coming to take us away at any moment. Sometimes it seemed the harder Mom and Dad tried, the more the state had to say about it. It had only been days since we'd all gone over to the mall to get some family shots done, too. We all smiled for the moment in front of that sheet for the shoot, Eliot with his back to me and I perched behind him with my hands on his shoulders, all of us in matching sweaters. I had no idea that was something families even did, but those days were making me feel even more uncomfortable than I was posing for that camera. It was a cheesy picture, but we still hung it in the living room. It made a good impression, I guess, for a day. It's just that too many things were changing for me. When my parents weren't living together and I was an only child, my life was everywhere else. When Dad and Bro came along with the new house, there was more in those walls to keep me rooted, and now that the folks were married, it was like a greenhouse had been thrown over me all of a sudden. Their marriage had even changed my name. That hippie hyphen last name of mine was taken out, and we all shared the name Gallagher like a real family. We were locked in together on a weak chain, but now I felt like I had something to do with making those last few links give way. It seemed just too soon for that to happen. That night, too, both Dace and the caseworker had gotten in my head, and I questioned myself for the first time. Was I really not normal? Was it that easy to spot? Could I even stop it if I wanted? I really needed someone to talk to about it. All these changes I was going through, things going on within me, but I couldn't talk to anyone. I didn't understand why I felt the way I did. I thought of Dace and I knew I didn't want to be like him. I had to do right by Eliot, but how could I ever make up for it now? Was he my responsibility? Was it too late? And damn it, how could I help it now? All I did was get dumped into his life as his half-brother. What could I do? But what would happen if I didn't? There were too many things I didn't want found out about me, about what I'd been through. Eventually I slept, and when I woke, Eliot was sitting across the room. And for the first time I didn't feel like blaming him for anything anymore. For the first time, I blamed myself for what had happened to me. I promised to do better. I was going to be the best damn big brother the kid ever had. "The lady's coming today. You hungry?" I asked. He sighed. "Yeah." So I dressed and stepped downstairs to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, grabbed him some eggs, and laid them on the counter. The warm morning sun blinded me, shining through the window over the kitchen sink. I opened the cupboard and pulled out a pan, tossed it down on the burner, and struck a match. As the eggs sat there on the countertop, I tried to get Kelly and Dace out of my mind. Every time I thought about her, I felt so empty, so sad, like I was about to lose every step on that otherwise unassuming sidewalk made so sacred that spring. The old electric touch crept up on my shoulders in the cool morning air, and when my brother trotted down, I had toast, eggs, and juice waiting for him. He sat down at the table but didn't dig in, having lost his appetite. Mom and Dad were already at work that weekend, and there we were, left alone, again. An hour before the caseworker came that day, I decided to take Eliot to the playground at the park and chase him around the platforms, just to be good to him. When that was no longer working, I gave up and let him slide, swing, and burn off steam on his own so I could sit one out on the sidelines. The park was empty most days like that, and especially when I wanted someone else to be there. On sunny days it was teeming after school, and the swings were usually the hub of it. The kids like Eliot would hop around throwing dirt and wood chips on the slide. The older ones would fly through in their wild games, ducking stairs and hopping railings, and the teenagers would just sit in circles playing cards. Everyone usually got some use out of the swings, but that damp afternoon it was a dead zone. And yet there I was with him, being a good big brother for a change. "Can't we just go home?" he shouted from atop the play gym. He was just grimly standing there alone. "No, not yet," I said, not wanting to see the caseworker. "It's boring," he replied. That day I saw my first hawk for the season. They used to circle the neighborhood with their wings stretched wide like an attack plane, a hovering alien spaceship perched on the wind to keep watch on us from above. They knew you could see them and sensed your fear like they could sense the rats in the patchy grass, and yet there I was in the open. The days counting down to that afternoon weren't leaving me feeling any safer than the spring rodents. I delayed going home because I knew my parents would be throwing a fit over something as soon as the caseworker left. They cared what I did all of a sudden, and would probably flock over me as soon as I showed up with Eliot in the late evening without a word of where we were. And then they'd be saying things like, "You should be a good example," things I only heard in the context of some lady's visits. "It's boring," Eliot stomped his foot. He was straight-faced and kicking the dirt by himself by then, so I rose to my feet and dusted off. The clouds swirled pink and blue in the approaching twilight, where the hawk was circling the park, and I just couldn't keep my thoughts tied to where I was. I decided to just give him what he wanted. It was time enough to head home and face the predators. After the humiliation that night, my cheeks burned on the pillow as I tossed in bed. The ribcage underside of my brother's bunk loomed over me once again. Since I'd seen that woman, I stayed awake that first night to chase the dreams away and slept a lot of daylight off on the school nurse's couch. After some stern words from Dad had left him too scared to be caught near me, Eliot kept out of reach in his own bunk. He wasn't as easy to keep out of my head, though. I suffered through every school day after Dace spread this rumor about me being queer. And I guess because I could have passed for the part with my short shoulders, the label stuck. He spread it around to get back at me for daring to come down on him for doing what he did to Kelly. And the next thing I knew, I was the whole school's biggest punching bag. It began when some punk threw my gym clothes across the locker room. One of them thought it was necessary to announce my supposed sexuality in the middle of class when giving a response, spreading the rumor further. "That's none of your business," the teacher said, as if she was in on it too. Everyone seemed in on it that week. In gym class, the teasing also turned violent. We started a unit practicing some basketball in the gym, always my favorite sport. But the second the teacher bounced a few basketballs out on the shiny floor, 5 or 6 pounded me down to all fours, each one stinging like a whiplash. And then, even as I dragged myself off the floor, I felt the bite of another one from behind, and that's when the gym teacher blew his whistle. Everyone had a good laugh. Meanwhile, I was choking back tears before I even made it to a stand. I felt so powerless. I hated it so much. I was always the first one out, the first one gunned, the first one on the sidelines, no matter what sport it was that week. The others broke out giggling even as the teacher was turning red, calling them out. But he was no savior. Every time he inserted himself, he just prolonged the spectacle and dumped most of the blame for it on me. He'd sling his big hairy arm around my short, bony shoulder and haul me from the sidelines, shouting, "Jared here wants to play a fair game. If you keep doing it, you'll all be sitting out." The last thing I wanted to do was play a game or get people sitting out because of me, so I just took it. I feared going in the boys' locker room so much I just wore my gym clothes the rest of the day. They made fun of that, too. At lunch, some of the kids stuck their wrappers and milk cartons in my open sweatshirt hood, and I stood and hurled whatever it was right back at them in one move, going off like a slingshot as a wave of laughter and taunts rose up behind me. Even friends at my lunch table got in on the gags about me wanting it in the ass or wanting to stick it up an ass, or kids just saying, "Hey, not my asshole, buddy." It left me so grossed out I couldn't even eat. I'd stand with my tray and dump it in the trash on the way out, and then they'd just do it more. "Yeah, you run, faggot," all the others laughed. The school bathrooms became places of refuge when these attacks happened those last few days. I'd go in there to splash my face in the sink so no one would notice if it hurt too much. But even there, every breath echoed on the tile and became its own mockery. I'd only been going to that school for a year and figured all this was little more than a bunch of natives taking advantage of a newcomer they'd never given a second glance before. And maybe that's why they wouldn't listen to me when I told them it wasn't true. I learned fast that being called a queer, a faggot, a queen, and all that had nothing to do with actually being that, because I knew it wasn't true about me, and yet there it was in the air. I could try to argue it all I wanted, but who would believe me? I started wondering if I could even believe myself. It was all I could think about that week, that little kernel of truth Dace somehow saw, and it was really starting to bother me. The rumors were bad, but then I had my own past, too, being some guy's little butt rape joke, and this brought it all back. The gym teacher even asked me if it was true, what they were saying, and I said no. He just said, "Good, nothing to worry about then," and patted me on the back. So upon returning from the park with Eliot that evening, I found the caseworker already sitting in the kitchen. She hadn't been happy that I'd taken my time coming home once again, especially with him. She tapped her dollar-green fingernails and gold bracelets on the linoleum tabletop to get my attention for the 5 minutes she turned her assessment onto me. I figured Eliot must have really made me look like the worst person on earth that previous week at his school. The poor kid didn't even know how badly he had me and the family he hated in the hole, and even though he couldn't be blamed for it, it was hard not to resent him at a time like that. He always did love attention. Listen, all this about making him say improper things for toys, about horseplay and pushing, about these unknown bruises on his legs and arms, she said, thumbing through her notes. Come on, Jared, this isn't just typical Big Brother stuff, is it? There's something else here. This is a conduct issue. You're at that age where you're starting to go off the handle down there. Am I right? Should I be concerned about this? Hearing those words used to talk about me was enough to make even my short shoulders shiver. Is that really me? I wondered. It never seemed as bad as it sounded coming out of her notes, and she'd gotten those from Eliot. He does it to himself sometimes, I said. Why would he be hurting himself? Because he hates living here with me and Mom, and he wants to go back to living with Dad like before, I said. But why would he? Yikes, there was no use in arguing that evening. My story was a shadow, lacking form itself, with only a sign that something was casting it. We had spoken softly enough in the kitchen that it almost convinced me that what I was saying was private, even with Dad a room away. Anything else? She asked. Well, I said, shrugging my shoulders, I don't hurt him. That's all. I mean, I never really hurt him. It was all just playing around. Maybe he thought it wasn't just playing, though, so I won't do it again, okay? I won't do it again. Right. What you just said makes a lot of sense, Jared, and I appreciate your honesty. Whatever happened, happened, and I think it best you cut it out. You're his big brother, so you should set the example, right? That's what big brothers do. When she said that, I immediately felt that old static charge on my skin well up from somewhere deep, and I shook my head. She lowered her eyes and pursed her lips, and that's when I knew she wasn't messing around. That's when I knew she knew more than she was letting on, or perhaps she didn't know well enough, but was waiting for me to do the work for her. I just wanted to up and walk that minute, but knew it would have been worse than sitting there and taking it, so I just took it. Not surprisingly, she ended her little inquisition of the house soon after that and quickly flew off into the dark. Dad didn't say a word to me the rest of the night out of shock, and so I sat up watching an hour of the Knicks game alone when we were supposed to be watching it together. But I couldn't stay focused on it, so I dragged myself up to the loft to fall down on my bunk. Mom had been trying to talk to me about it later, but I refused. She turned the lights out on me when she left. Eliot didn't appear in the room until it was time for bed. He stood at the door around the corner from the stairwell like a shadow gazing into the darkness, reluctant to catch me should I be awake. The boy flicked the light on and slinked to the floor to dress himself. Then Mom strolled in again to make sure he slept in his own bed and not on the floor somewhere. She peered at my bunk where I now faced the wall, still clothed and pretending to sleep. But I just knew that she was shaking her head in a mix of disbelief and hindsight, because obviously she had been right all along about the two of us. I'd proven her right. The lights went out and my eyelids blackened. The memory of the week haunted me, playing over and over in my head as I stared at that ribcage underside of my brother's bunk. My pillow got all my best that night. I sucked its corners and squeezed it flat as I turned over and over, scared, ashamed, and hurting, just needing someone to talk to desperately. After the home interrogation, I no longer questioned the harm I could have been causing. Now I feared the worst was true, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. No promise was good enough. April 25th, 1982. A lot of stuff I can't remember. But then a hawk was chasing me and I broke into a tool shed. I thought I heard something laughing. I saw a shadow fly around outside. It was a kid with his face in some strange desert with a black moon that turned white. He was just staring at me from outside, and I couldn't leave the room.